Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a graphic nature and in graphic detail, and may not be suitable for children under 13. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, welcome back to day 6 of our 7 Deadly Sins countdown to Halloween. Oh my God.
We're
Day
almost
six.
there. I hope everyone's
Right.
feeling spooky.
Yes, tonight Joyous is gonna be presenting us with a case that has to do with vanity, aka pride.
Yes, we're twisting it a little bit, but
well, no, it's depending upon where you read it, it's referred to as either or.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I remember in the movie The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, he refers to it as vanity. He says, "Vanity, it's my favorite sin."
Interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder
so
if that comes from like a word root of like
what the two mean. They must.
Yeah, what the two mean of like those having the same. I don't know. I listened to a really cool podcast the other day, talking about etymology, like how words develop. I'll shout out the podcast is Ologies with Ali Ward, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, but very much not about true crime. So if you're into other types of podcasts, I'll shout that one out.
Yeah, give it a listen.
Yeah, I love it.
What you got going on for us today?
All right. Well, I'll start off today's episode with a quote from our person of interest today. She says, "My biggest regret is not having the strength to tell someone that I was pregnant." Brooke Skylar Richardson.
Wow. Hugely ominous.
It is ominous, isn't it? Well, we'll soon discover what she's talking about here. And this is an interesting case today. It's may or may not be a murder case.
Right. Depending upon your point of view. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Have that in your minds as well as we start this case.
Okay.
So this is the story of Skylar Brooke Richardson and what may or may not be the murder of her child. So just as a note, we usually refer to suspects as their last names on this podcast. But since this story involves her and her parents, I might use her first name in here just to clarify because they all have the same last name, obviously.
No, and that makes sense because we did that Fumbles episode a while back, and rather than constantly have to say like Mike DiPolito and Dahlia DiPolito, I just use their first names. So yeah, that when it makes sense, it's a good way to go.
Exactly. All right. So it begins with the family. The Richardsons were a picture-perfect, all-American family. From the outside, everything looked wonderful. They were happily married. Their daughter, Skylar, was a pretty popular high school cheerleader, a senior in high school, and their son, a running back on the school's football team.
Wow, just all-American family.
So she was 17 years old and a senior at Carlisle High School in Carlisle, Ohio. She was an outwardly very sweet and well-adjusted girl. She loved kids. She got along well, was popular at school, had friends, but internally, she was struggling with some demons. She struggled with a severe eating disorder, and she had struggled with it since she was about 12 years old. And so she stood at about 5'2" and was often as light as only 100 pounds.
Wow. That's really petite.
Wow.
Really teeny tiny. It was definitely, impacted by the fact that she was a cheerleader and a flyer, which is, for those who don't know, the person who is lifted up in cheerleading. So the person who's tossed into the air and is lifted. So only the skinniest person on the team gets to be that person. So there's definitely, as she's like maturing, a lot of pressure to keep that weight down for that.
Right. And it's exciting. That would be an exciting position to be in, too.
Oh, yeah. It's so much fun. I mean, like the eyes are on you and it's fun to be thrown.
Right. Although you got to wonder how many times she gets hurt when she lands.
Well, you're thrown, and then you're caught by people again. It's actually usually pretty safe unless they drop you.
Right. I just imagine, I guess it would take practice, and I'm sure they're all very good at it, but you still have, wrists and elbows that are still hurts to hit. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So a side note for listeners who might not be aware, some of the symptoms of these severe eating disorders can line up with symptoms of pregnancy. And this will come up later. So some of these symptoms are like really disrupted periods or missing periods entirely. So it's not surprising if you don't have a period. It's a big symptom of a severe eating disorder, such as anorexia or bulimia, as well as frequent changes in weight and depressed mood. So there's a lot of shared symptoms there.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, it's really severe. And she struggled with, I mean, this is a long time throughout her whole, like, this is when a young girl is developing, and to be so severely restricted in calories. And what I watched, her mom told a story of when she was only 13, she refused to buy a pack of gum because each stick of gum had 5 calories.
Wow.
Well,
And
that's
that-
super unhealthy.
Incredibly severe. So she is really struggling throughout her adolescence. Her family tried to get her into, I mean, they had her in therapy and treatment with nutritionists, but this is something that she really, really continuously struggled with.
And you mix that in with any of the other typical teenage peer pressure stuff. Yeah, that's probably
100%.
brutal.
Yeah, and a lot of the information from this case has been publicly released, including texts from her mother, between her and her mother, talking a lot about her weight. And I just found it, this is a total side note, but found it really sad the way her mom was almost encouraging some of this behavior. Of she would text her mom from the gym and send her pictures and be like, oh, wow, like, I'm so excited about this. And her mom would say, good job, you're working so hard. Like,
Oh, I see. So her mother was being supportive in a situation where maybe she shouldn't have been supportive?
right. Like, she shouldn't have been like, that's disgusting. You need to gain weight. Because that would just
Right, make it worse.
make it worse. But she also shouldn't be saying, like, that's awesome, sweetie. Keep it up. You're going to look so good at prom.
Well, I was picturing, when you started saying that, I was picturing the mother being like the overbearing mother that's calling her fat and telling her she has to keep losing weight. That's what I was afraid you were going to say.
Oh, yeah. I didn't get quite that vibe, but obviously I haven't seen the entire history. But often we as young girls can learn this behavior from our parents. And we learn it from peers. We learn it from parents. We learn it from the way that weight is talked about. It's just so many young women struggle with disordered eating.
Yeah, that's crazy. I dated a girl in high school who had that problem, and I can remember sitting there. We were alone together. I didn't know what it was at the time, but she was making this weird noise. And I kind of turned to her and I was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, fine. Why? And I'm like, I don't know. Are you hungry or something? She's like, no. And then I found out later that she was vomiting in her mouth and swallowing it back down because it was involuntary on her part at that point.
Yeah, because you practice doing it so much and you lose. It's so dangerous for your body. It is. Eating disorders can be deadly and can cause severe lasting problems. Like, they're really not good for you. So back to the case. That's just some background on Skylar. In 2016, kind of the start of her senior year, she briefly dated a boy named Trey Johnson. They dated for about a month, but they broke up shortly after. Weren't really good together.
Okay. Now, is this going to be the father, you think?
I don't know. What do you think?
Sorry, I'm just like, you're setting it up. I'm like,
yeah, well, yeah, you're onto something here. I'll tell you that.
okay.
So later that year, so kind of late 2016, early 2017, so getting on into her senior year, she started seriously dating a boy from her high school named Brandon, and that relationship ended up being much more serious. So they were together all the time. He was hanging out with family, all that stuff. So because this relationship was getting more serious, her mother insisted that she start taking the pill, start getting on birth control. So she took Skylar to the OBGYN to get a prescription.
Now, doesn't that sometimes add weight to somebody?
It can, yeah. So that's definitely a risk. It's something that especially is in young girls' minds. Like, when you've never been on it before, you're like, oh man, am I going to gain weight? Like, especially when you're that age, sometimes that can feel like the worst thing in the world.
Right, especially for someone who's trying to keep weight off.
Mm-hmm. She wasn't resistant. She was the kind of kid who did what her parents told her. She was very obedient and very, I would say, non-confrontational as a person. That her mother described her as very non-confrontational. So, and it's, it's for the best. I mean, she definitely doesn't want to get pregnant.
Of course not. Who does?
And then, so by the time she takes her to the OBGYN, we're in late April 2017. So Skylar turned 18 in March. And so that means that she had to go into her appointment alone because she's now 18. So she had to go alone into the doctor.
And now, is that mandatory, or her mother wasn't allowed in there, or she just wanted to go in alone?
you kind of have to force, like when you turn 18, they really want you to go to the doctor and talk to them by yourself so that you tell the truth about important stuff. Especially, this might be just like an OBGYN thing, but like when I had the same appointment with my mom when I was probably 16, she went in with me because I was 16. But once I was 18, no, you go by yourself.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious if that was something that just wasn't allowed.
Yeah, I don't know how not allowed it is, but it's definitely like they would be asking heavy questions. They'd be like, excuse me,
Yeah.
mom, why are you in here?
Yeah, questions you don't want to have to talk about in front of your parents. I get that.
Exactly. Like, and you want to be able to be honest with your doctor, and sometimes people feel awkward, and that's valid.
Yeah, it's true. Makes sense.
At this appointment, she was given a pregnancy test. This is also girl shit. We're talking about girl shit today. Every time someone with a vagina and a uterus goes to the doctor, the first thing that always happens is you get a pregnancy test, because that rules out like so many things diagnostically that every single time I go to the doctor, they make me pee in a cup.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
I found out recently that men don't know that. I was like, oh, weird. They don't make you pee in a cup every time? Weird.
No, almost never.
No, unless we're dying. No.
Yeah, like for drug tests, but that's about it.
Yeah, no, every single time I have to think ahead of every doctor's appointment and be like, man, I hope I drank enough water today to produce pee when they demand it from me.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely not a guy thing.
Yeah, no. Well, all right. All right. Back to the story from the girl shit. Anyway, so she was given a pregnancy test, which to her shock and the doctors turned out positive.
Is it a real positive or is it a false positive?
We're talking a real positive here. They're doing accurate. So this isn't, when you get it done at the doctor, it's not the same as the one that we pee on at home that isn't exactly accurate. Because this girl did not look pregnant whatsoever. So they did the ultrasound, and the doctor told her that she was pregnant and would give birth in a matter of weeks.
Whoa,
Weeks.
Hold on. What?
Wow.
Yes.
Holy.
Wow.
She is almost 8 months pregnant.
Oh, that's insanity.
She had no idea.
Yeah, and she's not, and no one can tell.
No one can tell. I mean, she had gained a little bit of weight, but like we talked about, with disordered eating, weight fluctuations are very normal. And she has this cycle of gaining and rapidly losing weight. So no red flags there.
But how do you not feel it moving inside you?
Well, that will come along later, but
Okay.
this is something that can happen, especially like with some of these other symptoms. I mean, she probably experiences intense stomach cramps.
Sometimes I just feel sick and my stomach feels all swishy and swirly or whatever. And she's probably thinking something like that.
She only gained 15 pounds in the entirety of this pregnancy.
That's not good.
Right? So you think a normal baby, average baby is born at 7 pounds.
So that baby's going to be small.
So there's another test that they can do to determine how far into pregnancy you are, which is they basically measure your belly.
Yeah,
and
the
they
baby
measure
bump, so to speak.
Yeah, they measure the bump to how big it is. And that made it look like she was maybe 5 months pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a like medical mystery here. You probably also didn't see when I was young, there was this horrible show on TV called I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant.
No, I definitely didn't see a show called that.
I think it was made specifically to traumatize young girls into, having safe sex. But there's lots of these stories. Like, this is not unheard of. There are lots of stories of someone giving birth and that's how they find out they're pregnant. Like, this is not unheard of.
To me, that's just crazy. But I mean, I have a friend who works in the ER and she tells me some horror stories. So I can only imagine.
Yes. So it's plausible that maybe she did know, but I really don't think she did before this.
Okay.
So where does she go from here?
Oh, thank you for the segue. So she tells absolutely no one.
Of course.
She begged the doctor not to tell her parents, which since she's 18, she has that right. She has medical privacy because she's 18. She cries and sobs to the doctor, saying she's not prepared to have a baby. She begged for birth control despite already being pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Which maybe there's just a lack of knowledge, but like there's nothing that's going to do for you when you're already pregnant.
Yeah,
but,
you're a little late for the day after pill.
Yeah, she's in shock. Yeah. So she asks the doctor if she can have an abortion. But since she's obviously so late into her pregnancy, that's not an option here.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, but she just found out, which is crazy.
Yeah, I guess I would be if I just found out. I guess asking for an abortion, you don't realize it's just not registering just how far along you are. You
Yeah,
can,
it like doesn't make sense to her. She's just finding out.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And also, I'm not sure if she had yet put the pieces together of the exact date that she conceived because, maybe she's thinking it could have happened with Brandon and she's actually very early on. Who knows what was on her mind at that moment?
Right. Well, in that moment, anything. Yeah, exactly.
And so she kept her pregnancy a complete secret, did not tell a soul, no friends, no family. She didn't tell her boyfriend. She didn't tell even Trey, who would have been the father of the child.
Makes sense. I mean, at that point, you can't tell anybody because loose lips sink ships kind of thing.
Absolutely. Before giving birth, she searched how not to have a baby and how to get rid of a baby on the internet.
Oh.
That sets up trouble right away.
Yeah, that's incriminating.
It is a little incriminating, yes.
I think the first one was weird. How not to have a baby. Like, how do you keep it inside you and not let it out?
How to keep it inside.
Can you push a
10
baby
years.
back inside you?
Can I swallow it from the inside somehow?
Right. Can I reabsorb it into my
Yes,
body
right?
and save it for later?
That'd be
There are some
interesting.
animals that can do that.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty cool.
All
Oh,
right.
that's twisted.
Nature is cool as fuck.
Nature's scary.
She is, indeed. Skylar later denied that she tried to perform an abortion on herself or tried to do anything to damage this pregnancy. She went on and just kept it a secret.
Okay. I mean, I think there are
I don't know
people
if I
that would
buy that one.
argue. I think there are people that would argue that as soon as you knew not doing everything in terms of prenatal care would make you liable.
Exactly, negligent. There's an argument there that like it might have been already too late to do anything, but yeah, that not going into prenatal care is, negligent parenting. But it's all fuzzy when it's
Right. Especially in this
pre-birth.
situation. Yeah.
Exactly. In this situation where it's like, oh my God, like she's so far in and she had no idea. She has a really unhealthy lifestyle that would not bode well on a pregnancy.
No, she's getting thrown around and tossed and
Yes,
Holy
literally the
shit.
opposite of what you would do.
I'm working with someone who's 7 months pregnant and I know the size of her belly and I'm imagining her trying to be a cheerleader and it just wouldn't happen. And I know this girl is tiny and didn't know, but oh my God.
Yes, it's crazy. A few weeks later, her prom happens. May 5th is her prom. She avoids drinks, but still chooses not to disclose her pregnancy.
Again, it's no one else's business, so I don't blame her, but she needs to make a decision. That's the biggest problem.
Exactly. So she's avoiding. One thing that really surprised me in this story, so she bought her prom dress back in February. So that would have been at around 4 or 5 months pregnant, which
And
usually
it still
you would
fit.
And it still fit. And I saw the picture of her when she tried on the dress, like the picture from the prom store, and then the picture of her at prom, and they look identical.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
Literally, I could not believe my eyes. She looked identical.
Her not being aware, or even like, let's go the other end and say maybe she was aware and just went into full-blown denial. The mind's ability to affect the body blows my mind.
It's incredible. And so after prom, she was thinking that she was going to tell someone soon after prom. So after, all these final events of her senior year are happening, maybe she'll give birth and give it up for adoption and it won't totally ruin her life or something like that.
That makes sense. She could have, if she was able to figure out when she was going to have it and kind of get away from her family, she could have potentially given birth to that baby and no one would have been any the wiser.
Right, except for the medical bills.
Oh, yeah, obvious. Oh, yeah, that's true. She's on her parents' insurance, I'm going to assume.
For sure. But
yeah.
Okay. Or even with her parents knowing and not everybody else knowing.
Right. She would have to explain
quietly.
it to them, yeah.
So the next day, actually a little bit during prom and the next day, she started having really intense cramps and she is going to the bathroom a lot because she said she felt that something needed to come out.
Ooh.
I wonder what that something is.
I wonder what it is.
It's a big old poop.
Sometimes, I mean, it happens.
All right. I don't know if those are going to feel the same, but I've never been a pregnant woman. So,
I've taken big shits, but I've never given birth.
yeah, I'm going to assume it's going to feel a little different.
All right. So within 48 hours of the prom, she gave birth to the child in the bathroom of her parents' house in the middle of the night.
Wow.
So quietly that no one wakes up, not her brother, not her parents.
God, this
How
girl
the hell do you what?
Yeah, like she's capable of a lot of amazing things if she's doing that in silence.
Oh my
in
God.
silence.
No.
Holy shit.
Yep. So she claims what she experienced is a stillbirth, which means that the baby is born already not alive. She said that the baby never cried or opened her eyes, and that the umbilical cord was not attached to her. So the baby came out of her and the umbilical cord just fell out, which is not normal. It's usually has to be like clamped off and cut. It's a big thing.
Yeah, like that's a messy thing.
It's very messy.
Fuck.
That sounds insanely intense.
I'm just imagining, like, really, like, put yourself in this girl's shoes. I'm assuming she got in the bathtub for this, or maybe she's on the
over
floor.
the toilet.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
But you are sitting there either pushing or letting this thing pass through you, not making a sound because you're terrified that your parents are going to wake up and find you in that situation.
Yes.
Oh my God. And then to have it, and again, we're going to take her story at face value for now. And then to have it just not be alive when you take it out. Now, there's got to be a moment of relief on her part, I would imagine. But
that, she thinks her life can go on now.
Right. But holy fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you get snapped back to reality, and then you're like, what the hell do I do with this unborn child?
Which Joyous is about to tell us, I'm betting.
You guys are so good for me today. You're really zooming right into my storytelling. So what she does next, she then buries the remains in her parents' backyard.
Wow.
Holy crud.
She dug a hole in her backyard, placed the remains in the hole, closed it up, and then put her flowers from prom over the grave.
Wow.
Wow.
To both mark the grave and to, honor the loss.
And to mask the grave.
Well, no, it doesn't really mask the grave. I think that makes the spot stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. She really didn't mask it.
Yeah.
But you don't want that, right?
Well, I don't think she's fully thinking
straight.
logically. It's like 5:30 in the morning and she's traumatized.
Okay.
She just gave birth.
Yeah.
All right.
The hormones going through her body right now are definitely insane.
Wow.
So in this case, the prosecution will eventually allege that the baby was born alive, while the defense will argue that it was stillborn.
Interesting. I'm curious to see, and I know we'll get to it, but I'm curious to see exactly how they handle this, like legally.
It's very interesting. I thought the legal part of this case is very interesting. So we'll get there. So the morning after the birth, she texted her mother from the gym. So she's hours later in the gym with a picture saying, "I'm literally speechless with how happy I am. My belly is back. OMG."
At this point, she clearly thinks she's going to get away with it.
Well, I think in a way, she doesn't think she's done anything wrong. In her mind, I mean, it's already a tragedy, but the baby was born stillborn and she buried it. And in her mind, I don't think she realizes even the potential of what she could be charged with.
Right. That makes sense.
And I think that makes it, especially when you're that young, like technically she didn't kill anything. All she did was bury it.
Right. And to be
that's
fair,
what you do when your dog dies. You bury it in the backyard.
Right. And to be fair, if that OBGYN wasn't aware of it, nobody else would have. If she didn't go to that appointment and just gave birth, nobody would have known.
Exactly. So for the next 2 months, the baby remained buried. She still didn't tell anybody about what had happened until finally she has to go back to the OBGYN because she needs to ask for birth control, either refill or to ask for birth control again to get her, prescription.
I gotta be honest, if I were her, I'd have found a new doctor somehow.
Yeah, no
For real,
kidding.
or at least not go to the same clinic.
The amount of questions that are going to be asked is going to be absurd.
Well,
Yeah, this wasn't her best move.
no, and I don't know if you say not even the same clinic, but you don't want them to even see your old files because that's got to be listed somewhere.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
you go to a whole new doctor and you just say, "Oh yeah, whatever. I'm on my own." I don't know what I would have done in her situation. I might have just gone
Right.
to a free clinic to see if I could get birth control from them.
Yeah, exactly. So
Wow.
anyway, she gets to this clinic. She does end up seeing a different doctor, Dr. Boyce, who looked at her chart exactly and noticed that the teenager had been pregnant less than 3 months prior. And so
Yeah.
obviously she asks why she wasn't still pregnant or where the baby was.
My God. What did she say? That's what I want to know.
So she again cries, sobs, tells the doctor that she has recently given birth to a stillborn baby, and she tells the doctor exactly what she did. She tells the doctor that she buried the stillborn in her backyard.
Yeah, that's how you know she didn't realize that she did anything wrong.
Yeah, because when she's finally has anonymity, which you in theory have with your doctor, I guess she didn't realize that there were consequences for this.
Yeah, like had she didn't have to really say anything, I guess, and maybe that doctor wouldn't have reported it. I don't know, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Or if she just said something like, "Oh yeah, I gave birth, it's at home." You know what I mean? Then that's that.
Well, she could have done that, but also the clinic would have been following up like, okay, well, bring in the baby. We need to do like natal care. Like they're gonna follow up with that.
Gotcha. That's true
They
too.
would have been probably would have been on her record if she gave birth. Like that'd be a whole ass hospital record.
That's true. You can't even say, "Oh, I
Yeah.
gave birth at home." Yeah, like it goes back to the Bobby Joe Stinnett case with the other woman who stole her baby. Yeah, yeah, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
She was fucked.
Yeah, she was fucked either way. So she tells the doctor that she had named the baby Annabelle, saying, I decided to call her Annabelle. I didn't know anyone with that name, so I knew whenever I heard it, it would remind me of my baby girl.
Was this before the horror movie? Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's before the horror movie.
Yeah.
That's creepy as fuck.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I didn't make that connection. That's interesting.
Holy fuck. That would fuck me up. Like that woman,
Man.
she's now in her early to mid 20s, and there's this popular horror movie with this doll that she named her baby after accidentally. Oh my
Ugh.
God, she must hate horror movies and never watch them.
I don't think this girl would ever watch anything like that, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough.
So, for the record, the original Annabelle, or that we're referring to, came out in 2014.
Okay, so there you go. So it was there. She must just not have been aware of it.
Being a mandated reporter, Dr. Boyce was very, very concerned and had to call the police after getting this information. Skylar goes home and then she has to call. She talks to her colleagues and they're like, "Oh, yep, we have to call the police about this." So they go to her house. They tell her family that they need to interview her about something she might have witnessed. They said, "You're not in trouble." Yeah. They said, "You're not in trouble. We just need to ask you about something that you might have witnessed."
Yeah, that's bullshit right there.
Right. So right from the front, they're lying to the family and they're making it seem like she doesn't need a lawyer, which is kind of an important thing here.
It's hugely important.
Her parents drive her to the police station. They're obviously concerned, but they don't think anything's really wrong yet. So they're at the police station. And while they're there, while she's having her first interrogation, the other police go to their house, close it off as a crime scene, and immediately start looking for the infant's remains.
Yeah, that's so disingenuous.
Because they're not even telling them that this is happening and they're lying about what's going on. So they were like, "Oh, does she need a lawyer? Should we call a lawyer?" And they were like, No, it's fine. She's not in trouble.
Fucking police, man.
Fucking police. We love it when they lie.
Oh, yeah. They're always up to something.
They are.
Which is funny because I generally a supporter of the police, but these situations make it really hard to remain a supporter of the police.
Yeah, I am not generally a supporter of the police, so these instances are only confirmation. I'm usually more surprised when we have a case in which the police do a good job. That's usually when I'm surprised.
Okay. I think we talk about the bad cases. We always get the bad cases. So I genuinely think that 95% of the time the police are doing their job and they're doing the right thing. Otherwise, it would be a hell of a lot worse than it is.
Oh, definitely. No, and I
So,
agree. And as much crap as I give them in these cases, and as much as I love to rag on them, a good majority of them do very well in their jobs. It's just when they drop the ball, like we've seen in a lot of these cases, they really drop the ball.
right. I think dropping the ball is less than what they're doing to this girl because this is genuinely
Oh
fucking
no,
wrong.
I
lying,
completely agree.
manipulation, like
Yeah,
I'm just saying,
so much about, the prejudice
yeah,
and
all of it. It's so fucked up.
that's built into the system because of the way that cops behave, and that's why I don't share the opinion that the majority of cops are doing the right thing, but
Right. No, and I understand that.
it's okay for us to have different opinions.
100%.
And I also, not to spend this whole episode bragging on cops, but I know who in my high school graduating class has gone on to become a cop, and it's not exactly the best and the brightest.
That'd be like me becoming a cop or worse.
Yeah, but you're actually pretty bright, so
Oh, yeah, that's true.
When
I
he
am
wants to
intelligent.
be. When he wants
Yeah.
to be.
during that time, the police do find the infant's skeletal remains. So it had been 2 months. So all that was left was a skeleton. So they're dug up from the backyard and taken in for an autopsy. The initial autopsy could not find a cause of death due to the level of decay since it had been 2 months. However, a forensic anthropologist looked at the bones and determined that the baby's bones were partially charred and that the baby might have died of homicidal violence.
Charred.
Charred as in fire.
Okay, so she tried to set the baby on fire?
That's what this anthropologist is saying, is that there's evidence of that. So now with this information, she was brought in for a second interrogation, and the police detectives now had information that they determined made her guilty. So, sorry for clarification. After the first interrogation, they did tell her parents what was going on,
Okay.
but she was not arrested. She was allowed to return to her home because she told her story that it was stillborn and that she had just buried it, which is much less serious allegations than what will now be placed on her.
Right.
So as she's coming in for this second interrogation, they're again telling them, you don't need a lawyer. We just want to hear a little bit more of your story. We just need to talk about it a little more. So they're again saying, there's no need for you to have a lawyer here.
Which is such bullshit.
Such bullshit. You always need a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's also right before, so they already had her there, and it was just then that they got the news about the bones being partially charred. So this is fresh to the detective, and they bring in another detective who is a woman, ostensibly with the idea that, it'd be more relatable to Skylar and could probably help her talk more.
Right.
So this second interrogation goes a little differently. So they're going in with the assumption. They say to her, we know that there is something that you did not tell us. We know that there is more about that day that you didn't tell us when you were here last time. So they start with that.
I hate police interrogation techniques.
It's horrible. What they do in this interrogation, and I watched it, is fucked up for a lot of different reasons. I mean, they're fucking themselves because they're creating a really unreliable confession.
Right.
Right. So they are not only starting with that, they kind of take on this like good cop side where so the female detective offers to Skylar to hold her hands. So she's holding her hands the whole time, looking in her eyes, telling her, we know that you're grieving and this is really awful. I'm so sorry that you're going through this. You're not in trouble. We just need to know what happened. And then they start she's holding her hands, comforting her while they start suggesting things that they now think could have happened. They start asking questions like, is there any way that the baby could have been born alive? Is there any way that you heard her make a sound? Is there any way she moved? Did she make any sound? Was there maybe a little bit of gurgling?
Right.
And so they're causing her to recall this traumatic memory and then suggesting things.
Right. And eventually you're going to doubt your own memory and be like, well, maybe.
Which is exactly what happens.
Right.
She starts saying, well, maybe she moved her arms a little bit. Well, maybe she breathed a tiny bit. And she says, after the infant was born, she wrapped it in a towel and was holding it and sad, like mourning. One interesting thing that I do know about things in interrogations is when people lie, they don't use as many gestures. But when people are telling a true story, they often use their body to act out what was happening. And so that was something I noted while watching this investigation is she's talking about this baby and she's miming holding it close to her. The body language is saying that I'm telling this true story.
Right.
And she's saying
that's very interesting.
Yeah, which is like something that, just came up in my brain as I'm watching this is I'm like, this looks like she is telling me her story. I'm probably biased in that. Like, I find her very believable. But she says, well, maybe I held her too tight. And they're latching onto this. Every little bit that she says, well, maybe she moved her arms a little. Well, maybe she made a little gurgle. Well, maybe I held her a little too tight. All these little things. And so they're taking this as soon as she says, well, maybe, they're taking it as, yes, this happened.
Right. And that's how, unfortunately, they generally behave during these type of interrogations.
Right. Like the defense will later allege that this is getting a false confession out of her.
And it probably is.
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, so they start suggesting other things. So initially they bring up like, oh, what happened with the fire? And she responds with genuine confusion, which is different to what was happening before of like, she was like, oh, well, maybe, like, I guess that could have happened. This time she's like, what? No, there's no fire. There's nothing to do with a fire. Like, I guess my dad has fire pits in the backyard, but
volunteering information to help them fill in the blanks. Right.
Exactly. And she says, I think it was, and now I'm just telling this story and not even looking at my notes because it was so interesting. She says in that interview, like 17 times, she says, no fire. There was no fire. Until they've said it enough times, they're like, well, what if you burned it a little bit? What if you were trying to cremate her? Like, what if you wanted to take care of her body better? And then finally she says, I guess I wanted to cremate her and I took a lighter and I lit the bag that she was in and then I ended up burying it.
Wow.
That's
yeah, it's rough. She confesses to all of these things. And now it starts to be darker. I mean, as soon as they grab on to this fire route, they are convinced of her guilt because she said maybe to all of these things. They're convinced that she killed the baby and that she tried to burn it and then buried it.
Which is such bullshit.
Our legal system rests on innocent until proven guilty. And these detectives have just decided that she's guilty. After these admissions, they are able to arrest her. So they arrest her and she is charged with reckless homicide.
I'm surprised they went with homicide.
Yeah. What would you think it would be?
Manslaughter.
Like accident. Yeah, but they're convinced that it was intentional. Their whole case is like they've now decided that, this selfish girl murdered her baby because she didn't want to be publicly shamed. And this is the narrative that is created around this case is that this selfish little cheerleader, so much privilege. She didn't want to ruin her perfect image, and that's why I'll tie it back. That's why this is the case for Vanity is because the entire case ends up being about
her perceived
she's
vanity.
So vain. Yeah, right. That they perceive her as vain rather than like she has a disease. She has an eating disorder, which is a disease.
Right. But no, based on the behavior of these cops, they probably don't even believe that either.
Yeah, probably not. And they probably don't care or take it seriously.
That's true.
And it feels like they're grasping at the thinnest thread they can possibly use with her, manipulated confessions and manipulated answers to stretch that as far as it can possibly go. And they have the power. Who's gonna challenge them? She said this, and that's obviously as good as a yes.
Yeah, it makes me think of the Amanda Knox case in Italy as well. Where they held her on a ridiculous quote unquote confession.
Scott Richardson, who is Skylar's father, made this statement. I don't understand why from the very minute they showed up at our house, they started lying to us. I mean, the first words out of the detective's mouth were, quote, we just need to talk to your daughter about something she might have witnessed. She is not in any trouble. And he said that at least half a dozen times.
Which that alone should make you suspicious.
Exactly. Like it should really, but again, like this is a small community. I don't know if I mentioned at the start, this is the town of about 5,000 people. So this is close knit. People probably trust their police officers in this town.
Yeah, that's true.
Obviously, the police believe that she murdered her baby, and she's insisting that the baby was not alive. In this time coming up to the trial, obviously they finally get some lawyers, and there is some more information that comes out. There was a huge media circus around this case. I mean, how easy is it to sensationalize cheerleader murders baby, buries in backyard is the narrative that they take.
Yeah, that has the hallmark of a great case for news. Yeah.
Exactly. And the prosecution does this, what's it called? A press release. Press release from the prosecution where they're basically like, yep, we have all this evidence, and she murdered her baby, and then she burned it, and then she buried it in the backyard. He's got this shit-eating grin on his face as he's delivering these words, and it's just like, man, you don't have the evidence.
No, they're just sensationalizing what they think is going on.
Right. And
exactly, which helps their case.
And they have to be careful, though, because they're tainting a jury pool.
Exactly. And there's like, they're tainting, this was a media circus. I mean, online, people were talking about this. I remember this happening. I remember people talking about it.
It's funny because I don't remember when it happened.
Interesting. Usually it's the opposite.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not too often that you know a case that I don't.
Yeah. I'm a little bit going off notes now because I'm just telling a little story.
Yeah, because you're passionate about it and you remember this whole section very well. So I get it.
Yeah. Because of all this media circus, the judge ended up issuing a gag order. So there would be no more things released about the case to the public, which, you know, only sort of helps as a stopgap because basically most of the evidence is already out there. So it doesn't really help, but it actually kind of hurts. A few months after the initial autopsy, the forensic pathologist, who's Dr. Murray, she was the one who initially looked at the bones and said, oh, I see charring there. She looked at them again, and she actually retracted that. She said, actually, now that I've seen the bones fully dried, there's no evidence that this was burned at all. There's actually no evidence of that.
Wow.
That seems way too coincidental.
No, I don't think it's coincidental.
Interesting.
I just think that you would think that like maybe you shouldn't have made that first statement in the first place.
Well, no, but that's my point is like she came out with this retraction when they thought it was going to be convenient for them, for her to come out with this contraction.
So I'm confused. You think the coroner is helping the girl?
I think that the coroner is on their own. I don't think they're helping or hurting. But
okay, because
it's coming out at a very inconvenient moment.
It really is, and I think this might just be, you know, bad luck because it's just there's a difference apparently between looking at bones that are still wet and bones that have fully dried out. I don't really know what the difference is, but apparently, yeah, now she's like, nope. And I think it's kind of horrific that everyone is out here saying that I am claiming that this baby was burned when there's actually no evidence for that. So take that back.
Right. And now the news isn't going to be able to report that fact. So everyone still thinks she, tried to cremate her baby.
Right. And then they also had gotten her to admit to it in their intense interrogation. They got her to say, oh, well, yeah, I guess I tried to cremate it. She had denied it a bunch of times. And she had also said she didn't kill her baby in that interrogation. She said she did not kill her baby 29 times.
29 times.
29 times she said, I did not kill my baby.
Holy crud.
And yet they're waiting for that one moment where she said, maybe I held her too tight.
Exactly. Like her traumatized, just trying to be agreeable. You watch this and you can tell she's just trying to be agreeable. And like obviously she doesn't want to be there. It's horrific. And she wants it to be over. And so she later claimed that she ended up just telling them what they wanted to hear because she just wanted to go home and she didn't want to deal with this anymore.
Right. And that happens a lot.
Yeah. It's definitely not unheard of. Coming up to the case, obviously the prosecution, they're alleging that she killed her baby, she burned the body, and then buried it in the backyard of her home. So that's their version of the events. The defense argues that she was subjected to an overzealous interrogation because of the theory of the baby burning, and that her baby was actually stillborn, and that it's because of the interrogation that she said those things, and that there is no actual evidence that the baby was born alive.
Right. Which, again, that makes sense to me.
Right? Yeah, there's technically no evidence of that. They brought up to the stand a psychologist who diagnosed her with dependent personality disorder, which I had never heard of before this case. It's basically a personality disorder that's described as making someone very agreeable and very afraid of confrontation, and will pretty much tell people exactly what they want to hear for fear of abandonment or confrontation.
You've never heard of that before?
No, I've actually never heard of that one.
Yeah, that one I guess that comes up a lot in these type of cases, which we haven't covered too many on, but yeah, that's a fairly common thing. People just want people to like them, and therefore they're very agreeable. So interesting. I'm just surprised you hadn't heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've heard of a lot of those things, but yeah, I never heard of that one. So, and basically the psychologist is saying that this disorder could have led her to make a false confession.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Here we are in the case. This is 2 years after the events happen, and she's facing court, and the charges are as follows: aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, endangering of children, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse.
Jesus Christ.
So in the state of Ohio, aggravated murder carries a mandatory life sentence. So that is obviously the one that they're going to try to fight the hardest against.
Right. Wow.
Involuntary manslaughter obviously still carries a prison sentence. I believe child endangerment does as well. But those are not life sentences, whereas, the aggravated murder would be a life sentence.
Right. And this goes back to the case where we talked about how, I don't remember which one it was, where they were dropping, the one that happened here in Worcester with Marie Martin, where they dropped other smaller cases because they were just going after the murder case. This is them trying to throw as much mud at her as possible because they want something to stick so that no matter if one fails, she can be convicted of the other.
Exactly. The prosecution's argument goes as follows. The state expects the evidence to show that on May 7th of 2017, Brooke gave birth to her daughter, Brooke being her middle name, actually, but or maybe that's her first name, but she goes by Skylar. Anyway, they say Brooke gave birth to her daughter in her house in the middle of the night. Upon realizing that she was going into labor, she still told no one. She did not tell her parents, who were asleep downstairs, or her brother, who was across the hall. Brooke took her own daughter's life, destroyed all evidence of her birth, and buried her in the backyard.
Wow.
That was their opening statement. It was very vicious. I watched it. I did not like it.
So much of what they said is true, but the stuff that's not true is the really damning stuff.
Exactly. The stuff that there's no proof of.
Right.
So they also bring back up the texts that she sent to her mother, including, I am literally speechless with how happy I am.
Yeah, that one's tough.
And there would also been a text to her boyfriend she was like, I feel so much better now. I am so happy.
Yeah,
those are tough.
Yeah, those are tough. And it does tie into the vanity thing. Yeah.
Yes. And also, physically, of course she feels better. She's no longer pregnant.
Well, she just gave birth. You'd think she'd feel like shit the day after.
You'd think, but she seems to be jumping right back up. I mean, she's obviously not in great physical strength because she is underweight, but she's still athletic and active.
Well, and she did give birth without making a sound, so she can certainly take a beating.
Exactly. And to a very, very small infant.
Right, but that's gotta hurt.
Still gotta hurt. So yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I've never passed a kidney stone, but I hear it's fucking awful, and that's gonna be smaller than what she passed.
For real. So these statements led the prosecution to basically frame the entire case around Skylar's vanity, and they use that word specifically. Her vanity, her obsession with her appearance, that's what they're framing her eating disorder as. It's the reason why she didn't want this pregnancy and why they quote, terminated it, so that no one would think less of her for being a pregnant teenager.
I might buy that argument back in the 1950s, not today.
Yeah. I mean, I can still, I see the plausibility of it.
Right.
But from all the other information that we learned about this girl, it doesn't make sense for her.
No, I agree. It doesn't. None of that sounds like who she is.
Yes. But people can be deceiving. So,
that's true,
I guess we have to suspend some doubt here. So in response, her defense team stated that she suffered from an eating disorder and that her weight regularly fluctuated. So it was actually very normal for her to be often messaging her mother about any change to her body, which that's really sad. I wish that exchanges weren't happening. I don't feel like that's healthy, but
Right.
it was her normal. It was very normal for her to be sending, body pictures to her mother and being like, look at these two pictures, look how much I lost. I feel so good. The defense also argued that there was a lot of evidence that the baby could have been born stillborn, largely because of Skylar's eating disorder. Like I said earlier, she only gained about 15 pounds throughout the entire pregnancy, and that's not healthy.
That's crazy.
Like, there's so many things you need to do to take care of a pregnancy, and that not healthy.
Yeah, gaining weight is kind of part of that.
It's very much part of it. You need it to take care of the baby in your body.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to do that healthy stuff when you have a disease taking over you, telling you no.
Yeah, and most of the time, she didn't know even that she was pregnant. So,
right. But in that situation where someone with a eating disorder, is pregnant, there's a support network if everybody knows that you're pregnant. So
exactly. So the final argument from the defense is that Skylar's description of the baby indicated that it was a stillbirth, and she probably wouldn't have known this ahead of time. So she described the baby as coming out white in color, when usually a live birth comes out as almost like a dark blue or purple color. I don't know if y'all ever seen a fresh baby.
No, I've never seen a fresh baby.
No.
Oh, well, they come out fresh. Like, they're usually a blue or purple color, especially before the umbilical cord is cut. But once they start to breathe air, they start to become a more normal color. And she also described, and even in her initial visit to the doctor, like, not needing to cut the umbilical cord, that it just fell right out of her, which is not normal, but is normal for a stillbirth.
Oh, I didn't know that either. That's cool.
Yeah, because that's what is feeding the baby in the womb. It's the umbilical cord.
No, I knew that, but I didn't know
that.
Yeah, I didn't know that in a stillbirth it just kind of breaks off.
Yeah, because at that point your body, and this is like one of the reasons why stillbirths are really dangerous for the mother, is your body starts to reject it, and almost sees the pregnancy as a foreign body and is kind of cutting it off from the rest of your body.
Interesting.
That was another indication that it was a stillbirth, especially just the way she described it, and that the baby didn't, come out crying or moving at all. Because of all this, she pleaded not guilty to all the charges.
Yeah, at best, she's guilty of not knowing what to do with a dead body afterwards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the defense argued that, she was a frightened teenager who was too worried to tell her family about the baby. And that's why she just, decided that this should be her burden alone to carry, and that she took care of the burial herself. She talks about mourning it, burying it, leaving the flowers there, naming the baby. Naming a baby is being attached to it.
Right.
After a few days of trial, we reach September 12th, 2019. After deliberating for 4 hours and 25 minutes,
wow,
the jury comes back out, ready to deliver their verdict.
That's usually really good or really bad.
Yeah, exactly. Any guesses here of what the result is?
Not guilty of murder. From there, I don't know.
I'm going to say that they find her guilty.
Of all the charges?
Yes.
All right, we have two different opinions here. So, she was found guilty of only one charge.
Oh, okay.
And that is gross abuse of a corpse.
Right, because she didn't know what to do with a dead body.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So, like,
right.
in the eyes of the law, she should have told somebody, had a proper burial, and that her just, burying it in her backyard is abuse of a corpse.
Okay. I mean, it's a little weird, but
I also felt that that's a little weird, but I guess, like, social norms of how we deal with things. It's probably, like, I don't know, not safe for the wildlife to just be dumping bodies. Like, that's not right.
I just wonder, because, you see it in movies and TV shows where someone's buried in their backyard. Is just that not a thing?
I guess not.
I'll have to look that up.
Unless you do, maybe you have to, like, have a permit or something.
Yeah, I'm sure you have to have the city or the state's permission, but you see it all the time in, in fiction. Apparently, you can only bury a family member on your property if the property is under the control of the person who passed away.
Interesting.
There's only 13 states that have laws that forbid home burials. Most of the others are fine. 8 of the states that allow you to do it do require a licensed funeral director to be involved.
That makes sense. She's not guilty of all of the other charges because there's insufficient evidence. There's not enough proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that the baby was born alive. There's nothing you can do to prove it.
Yeah, there's no way you'd be able to prove that.
Yeah, they couldn't prove that murder happened because they couldn't prove that life happened. So her sentence ended up being 3 years probation and time served because she was in, I don't know, either jail or prison. I'm not sure which one.
I think
For the
it's
2
just
years.
jail. Yeah.
Just jail. Yeah. Just jail while she was, for the 2 years while she was awaiting trial. So she had already served that time.
That's fucked up that she had to sit in jail that whole time.
Yeah, when they really didn't prove anything. But also, like, effectively, if she wasn't in jail, she was on house arrest because the media was a fucking circus.
Oh, I
lined
believe
up
that.
down her street. People, they talked about, the mother and father talked about the media just gathering around their house in lawn chairs with their cameras and staring all day and posting any picture that could be found of them. So they were like locked in their house. All of their movements were tracked and they couldn't leave their house. So it was jail or house arrest.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, obviously jail is nothing to shake. What is the phrase? Like
shake a stick at?
Just shake a stick at. And in the trial, she was extremely unwell, down to about 90 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And you can see it on her body just so much. She looks like like wind blows and it would knock her over.
Right. I mean, I've seen some images before we talked about this, but now I'm going to have to look her up.
Yeah, and she's a lot of hair loss. She's 20 now, but she has a lot of hair loss, which can also be a symptom of eating disorders. So she's clearly succumbing deeper into this disease and extremely unwell.
Yeah, you can see, I'm looking at a picture now that's comparing her in the prom dress versus her at trial.
Yeah.
And she's lost all shape to her face. She's that's crazy.
Yeah. So she ended up serving probation for only a year. So her probation was terminated in 2020. And I mean, obviously following this, she can't get a job anywhere. She's stuck, but she did end up attending college. I'm not sure if she ended up like doing that online or if she was able to go in person.
Well, I'm sure if she went outside her area, fewer people would recognize her.
Yeah, and like she could probably change her name and do some stuff like that to help, but it's like, yeah, her face is plastered everywhere, so it's just really, really hard.
Maybe changing her name would help, but I mean, if she was up here and sitting next to you on a bus or something, you probably wouldn't be like, "Hey, aren't you?" You know what I mean?
Right.
In some states, you do have to disclose your criminal history,
so that or like get background check before a job.
Right, but background checks for jobs are generally about larceny and theft and violent history. And I guess technically this would her charge wouldn't fall under violence.
Yeah, but it doesn't look good.
No, but that's if they can see it.
That's true. I guess I don't really know how that works.
Yeah.
But so in 2022, she won a bid to have all the records of her conviction sealed. So at this point now, it probably wouldn't show up on a background check.
Yeah, now it's moot. Yeah.
Exactly. But accomplishes very little because, law enforcement can still see
search.
It. Exactly. You can Google her name and that's what comes up.
Oh, that's true too. She's probably better off changing her name.
Yeah, that was my thought too, is that she's better off changing her name, getting far, far away. But as far as I know, she's still there in Ohio. So, but I don't know. And I don't think it's our business.
No, and she deserves her privacy, certainly.
Exactly. Whether you believe that Skylar Brooke Richardson actually killed her child, or if you believe that Annabelle was stillborn, Skylar gets to have another chance at life.
Right, which I think she deserves. Even if the baby was born alive, which it's unlikely, it probably wouldn't have lasted much longer anyway.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been healthy for sure.
Yeah, so I certainly don't hold it against Skylar.
It's just a big whirlwind of a case, and like you had said, it's good that she gets another chance at life, and I think that it's really unfortunate that things were coerced and the investigation was the way it was.
Yeah, I want to go out and say that I doubt she ever would, but Skylar, if you ever listen to this podcast, reach out to us because we would love to interview you if you were open to it and hear your thoughts because I think it's clear that all three of us are behind you on this.
Yeah, she did do an interview in 2019 with Cosmopolitan magazine. So a lot of the things we know from her, but I think generally she keeps to herself.
Which I don't blame her.
Yeah, I mean, she's so traumatized.
Yeah, it's just that's a crazy situation.
Yeah. And one final note on this case that I thought was really positive was that during the sentencing, I believe, there was a request from Skylar's family that they get the remains of Annabelle back from the police.
Oh, yeah.
Which was actually granted by the judge.
Oh, wow.
The judge said, yep, I will, like, to the father, I will hold you accountable to have a proper burial of these remains, and to make sure that the father also and his family also get a chance to grieve, which they did end up doing. They ended up having a proper burial with both families.
Awesome.
And then after this, the family finally can start to mourn, the daughter, granddaughter that could have been.
I just want to say though, can you imagine being the father? He had no idea.
No idea.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like a girl you date for a month.
Yeah, some girl you had sex with and accidentally knocked up and had no idea you knocked her up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's holy.
I wonder what he felt, like whether he was like, well, I didn't know about it. Like, I wonder if he feels something for the child, or whether it's traumatic, or whether he's like, I had nothing to do with this, or like what that feels like for him.
Yeah, I mean that would be, especially because it's all after the fact. Like it's just you're told. It'd be like if someone told you that in the womb you had a twin, but they didn't die. They didn't make it. They died. But now you're like, however old you are, 20, 30, 50 at the time that you find that out. What can you feel about it?
Yeah.
You're missing a hypothetical.
Yes, which is a strange thing mentally to mourn.
Yeah, so I don't know that he'd be upset, but who knows? Some people are a hell of a lot more sensitive than I am. So
it's true. And everyone has, different hangups and different feelings and different attachments. So who knows?
Yeah, absolutely crazy. That was a good case.
Yeah, I really enjoy, I guess not enjoyed, but I thought it was very interesting to learn about, especially from a psychological standpoint. And it's interesting the ambiguity of obviously, I mean, probably you can tell by the way I told this story that I think the baby was stillborn.
But at the same time, I agree with you. There's
no
evidence.
Proving whether it was or wasn't.
Right. Even if it was, what else could she have done? I don't think that would have been an ambulance there fast enough.
Yeah. Yeah, considering the umbilical cord was already fallen off. I mean, if that's true, I mean,
right.
Who knows?
I would like to say I can't imagine anyone not believing her, but we all know how this world is.
Right. And there was, the media circus that was created that was presumptive of her guilt.
Yeah.
Just a lot of people to presume it. And there was some sketchy shit with the police being like, okay, well, just because the bones weren't actually burned, that doesn't mean that she didn't actually burn the baby. Look, she said she did.
Right.
And there's a lot of this is in Ohio where there's a lot of sanctity of life feelings.
Right.
And there was something that the judge said in his final closing statements about I hope this reminds you that's of the sanctity of life, that all life is precious. And he says to her that, I'm paraphrasing, but he says to her something like, I hope you know that if you had made different choices, that Annabelle would still be with us.
When you said Ohio, I looked up at our map with all the flags in it. We have 5 cases so far in Ohio.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The only one that comes close is Washington State, and that's only because of Israel Keys killing more than one person in that state.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, do you have a flag for each crime or?
Correct. So basically, any confirmed murder, I put a flag in there. With Israel Keys, there were, I think, 5. So there are 5 flags with his. I wrote the case number on it. Each murder victim has a different flag, unless there is more than one murder in the same city.
Okay.
Like Snowtown just has 1 flag.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I'm going to run out of space if we do the same cities over and over again, I'm going to run out of space.
All right. We'll keep the variety. Listeners, suggestions in new cities. We love that.
Yeah, I am researching them, as you've seen in some of the more recent episodes. We've had Antarctica and other random places. So we're looking for, we're looking to put flags in places that don't have flags. So give us your suggestions. thank you, Joyous, for that amazing presentation. That was really
Of
good.
course. Thank
Yes,
you
very
for being
well
such
done.
incredible listeners and for perfecting the segues into my story. It was really good.
Right. We're all getting good at this.
Yes,
we
we
are.
are.
And we want to thank all of our listeners for listening tonight. Tonight was night 6 of our 7 Deadly Sins countdown. Tomorrow is Halloween.
Yeah.
I know. I hope y'all are doing something fun tonight.
Or tomorrow night.
I mean, also tonight.
Oh,
Halloween is not just a day, but a weekend.
Oh, you're right. But except
Halloween
Halloween.
weekend.
It's
Yeah.
a whole month. Who are you kidding?
Yeah, that's
You're
true
so
too.
right.
We spent the whole week celebrating with you guys. So tomorrow night wraps up the 7 Deadly Sins with Lust. And let me tell you, and I know I said this yesterday when it was just Jameson and I, but this case is fucked up.
Oh, yes,
So
it is.
yeah. So get ready. If you're not out having fun with kids and candy, join us for some really, really messed up stuff.
All right.
So thank you guys. I am Janice Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Bye.